Good. So I think we will just get started, get rolling on this event. We still have one participant for our panel who is had advised ahead of time that that she would come very close to the starting point. But let's see if she comes and join us in a little bit. Welcome to this COP26 event. It's organized by the Zero Emissions Shipping Mission. My name is Mads Peter Sacco. I'm Head of Industry Transition at the Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, and I had the role of being the moderator in the event now. We are going to discuss what it takes to scale up the zero emission fuels for international shipping. Today we'll have the co-leads from the zero emission shipping mission, but also leaders from private companies from the energy and shipping sectors. It's been really great to hear during the past couple of days here in Glasgow that normally you would see this event. This is of course by nature and by definition a government event, a summit. But we've also seen a lot of private sector participation. I think it's been, some have noted, quite unusual to see how many leaders from the private sector have actually come here and take part. And this is of course fantastic. This goes to the heart of the zero emission shipping mission, bringing together private sector and authorities. If we want to find the most efficient way to decarbonize shipping fast, if we want to improve energy efficiency, if we want to support the first movers, and if we want to scale up the production of the alternative fuels, partnerships between the private sector and the public sector is an absolute requirement. This event is going to be live streamed over a YouTube channel. So we are live right now, and welcome to our virtual audience as well as the live audience. We will just have a, maybe you can just scroll. Yeah, so here you can see just the event, and if you go to the next page, then you can see the Slido here, where all virtual participants can go in and type their questions. So there'll be an opportunity also for our virtual participants to ask questions to the panel that we will have in just a couple of minutes. What I'll do first, without any further ado, is to welcome Rikke Vedder Olofsson. Rikke is the Deputy Director of the Danish Maritime Authorities, but also importantly here, the Chair of the Executive Committee of the Zero Emissions Shipping Mission. So over to you, Rikke.
Thank you, Mads, and a very welcome to you all, live and virtual. I have the pleasure of welcoming you all here today at this event, focusing on what it takes to scale up zero-emission fuels for international shipping. Before we go too deep into the event, the topic of today's event, I'd like to start by shortly introducing the zero-emission shipping mission to those of you who are not familiar with it. The Zero Emission Shipping Mission is a public-private partnership under the auspices of Mission Innovation, and Norway, together with Denmark and the US and the Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping and the Global Maritime Forum are co-leading this mission, and it's a pleasure to be here with some of our co-leads today. Mission Innovation, as some of you may know, is a global initiative with an aim to catalyze action and investment in research, development, and demonstration to make clean energy and an affordable, attractive, and accessible for all. The Zero Emission Shipping has a clear but also very ambitious goal: 5% of the global deep sea fleet measured by fuel consumption to be made of ships capable of running on a well-to-wake zero-emission fuel, such as green hydrogen, ammonia, green ethanol, and advanced biofuels. And by 2030, at least 200 of these ships to be primarily use these fuels across the main deep sea shipping routes. This will lay the foundation, we hope, for increasing numbers in the following years towards a zero-emission shipping future. In the shipping mission, we will focus on the entire value chain, the ship, the fuel production, and the infrastructure, to drive the sector to a tipping point in its transition. So we aim to introduce viable vessels that operate on zero-emission fuels to the global fleet. We hope to scale up efficient production of zero-emission fuels and establish global port infrastructure to support vessel operating in zero-emission fuels. In practice, we want goods to be transported from Shanghai to LA across the main deep sea shipping routes without emitting emissions. Today, we do have the technologies that could make zero-emission shipping happen, but these technologies will have to be scaled and developed further in order to bring down costs. At this event, our panelists will focus on the green fuels and discuss what it takes to scale up production. And to set the context, zero-emission fuels need to be further developed in order to lower their carbon intensity, and the subsequent production needs to be scaled massively in order to meet ship owners' demands. Likewise, ship efficiency of fuel production needs to be improved in order to further reduce the cost of zero-emission fuels significantly to make them more competitive with fossil fuels. However, fuel infrastructure projects in ports are not effectuated unless energy suppliers and ship owners and vessels. So this is a chicken and egg problem. To reduce emissions from the shipping sector, ships need to be technically able to run on zero-emission fuels. That is thus needed in much larger quantities than we have available at this current stage. The recent published study on innovation needs for the decarbonization of international shipping by Oxford Research and the Technical University of Denmark highlights that there is no clear green pathway to compared to fossil marine fuel at this stage. So a number of possible green fuels exist out there, but we have to find our way. All of the currently known zero-emission fuels have limitations and challenges which need to be addressed with innovation. The innovation needed to have a general aim of improving the cost efficiency, performance, safety, and sustainability of the fuel value chains, so there are many perspectives to take into account. The panel that we have here today are very qualified to discuss this, and they will share their views on what it would take to scale up zero-emission fuels for international shipping. I look very much forward to hear them discussing this today. Thank you, Mads.
Thank you so much, Elaine. In the true spirit of partnership, I will ask our panelists to come and join us. So we have Kelly Speaks-Bachmann. Please come and join me here. You're the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, but also the Acting Assistant Secretary for the US Department of Energy. So welcome to participate in this panel. We also have Bernard Stolnens at the Yara International. And I will also ask Masahiro Takahashi, General Manager for the Environment Group at NYK Line. So what you see here is you could say, very, very important players in getting this all to work. We have the private sector in the fuel providers represented by Bernard. We have the shipping sector represented by Max. And we have also the authorities represented by Kelly. So welcome, and appreciate that you wanted to come here and spend some time with us and share your thoughts, and maybe also learn from each other as we go along. But I'll start out with you, Kelly, and ask a question around the policy and research side. If you can maybe share some thoughts with us about what's needed to drive the progress, what's needed to accelerate the scale up of green fuels from the viewpoint of the Department of Energy and the US government.
Well, first of all, I'm going to have to get rid of hold my voice down a little bit because it sounds like I'm yelling, but thank you for having me here, first of all. I'm really excited about this entire day. We have been speaking about the opportunities for hydrogen, the opportunities for biofuels, and the opportunities for electrification across the entire transportation sector. And this mission itself is especially interesting to us for its potential to really reduce the greenhouse gases from shipping industry by 50%. And so we really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you all today. A little bit about our organization, just to start us off, the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy within the Department of Energy. It's about a $2.8 billion organization that uses a number of mechanisms to fund projects that will work its way all the way from the continuum of early stage research through decarbonize our economy by 2050. And so that's sort of what brings us here, because when we talk about decarbonization of the transportation sector, we talk about road, of course, but also rail, sea, and air. And that takes a lot more than just electrifying things with batteries. That takes using biofuels. And so our office has a biofuels office to help with the research and development and the scaling up and demonstration of those technologies, as well as the hydrogen office. We just launched the H2 Twin Cities. I'm a little bit late because we were just running from that launch, where we're looking to pair up cities, whether they be port cities or whether they be within the internal land of different cities across the nation, to really learn from each other and figure out the policies and the infrastructure and the work that needs to be done to be implemented. So thank you so much. This is sort of what we're focused on here in this partnership.
Sounds great, and it sounds like there are a lot of synergies, you could say, and similarities where bringing together, you could say, the knowledge and the research that's done in one area to be brought on to some of the other sectors, which is, of course, in the true spirit of collaboration. So, if I turn to you, Bernard, and talk a little bit from the commercial side, if you look at what's needed to develop sufficient supply of zero emission fuels from the perspective of Yara and from you, what do you think are the things that are needed the most to get us going?
So maybe first a short word about Yara. We are a Norwegian-based but global fertilizer company, and we are the largest global trader of ammonia. So green ammonia is really the topic I'll be talking about. But why ammonia? Very briefly about that. Ammonia can be stored and transported at -33 degrees, and it then has a higher hydrogen density than liquefied hydrogen in itself. So ammonia is a really promising intermediate for hydrogen storage and transportation. So, and I'm optimistic about what I'm learning here at the Climate COP. We've seen Franz Timmermans just a few minutes ago in a room over here mention green ammonia for shipping as a great opportunity to clean the maritime industry. But then over to your question, and what does it take? So maybe 4 points. First of all, it starts with the energy. We need renewable energy, large scale, in order to produce green ammonia. Our largest site in the Netherlands, which is not that far from the port of Rotterdam, it's our largest ammonia production site. If we want to decarbonize that ammonia, we will require about 2 to 4 gigawatts of renewable energy. So that adds about 20 to 40% on top of the existing Dutch commitments to establish renewable energy capacity. So we need renewable energy at scale in order to decarbonize. So that's point number one. The second point is about pricing and the first mover risk. The first volumes of green ammonia will be 2 to 4 times as expensive as the gray ammonia. So we need to have support both from the public sector in order to help us establish the the production at scale so that we can improve the efficiencies of the technology and get costs down over time. And then we need a market that is receptive and is willing to take on board those first volumes to help us scale up and move forwards. And that brings me to the third point. So valorization. How much is it worth for the full supply chain that we decarbonize? There was a promising report coming from BCG and the World Economic Forum earlier this year called the Supply Chain Opportunity. And they pointed that the emission intensities are very high at the beginning of supply chains, and the economic margins of operations are lower. Whereas more downstream in the value chains, you find higher margins, but lower emissions. So they calculated what it would take to decarbonize a full value chain. So a pair of jeans can be decarbonized for less than 2% of the cost on the jeans. Similarly, for a food basket, you can decarbonize for less than 4% of the value of that food basket. So if we're able to get some support from the markets in paying for the decarbonization, we are opening up opportunities to move a lot faster. And then just a final point, and that is to guarantee the sustainability of the ammonia supplied. So we need to have some sort of system in place with a classification of emission thresholds and guarantees of origin so that everybody can document that we are not doing double accounting and that the volumes delivered are really decarbonized.
It sounds good, and it sounds like you have a very good overview of what it takes to get us there. And it is, of course, a big problem. You could say that overall for the society transition is not actually very large. It may not be evenly distributed, and that's also something that needs to be looked at. So it's not become, you could say, those that can afford it the least that has to carry the biggest part of the burden, which is also intensively discussed here at the COP this time around. But it's interesting that the cost to the end consumer on average is actually not necessarily very high. So thanks a lot for bringing that input. Maybe I should also just remind our participants online that we have the slido.com where if you use the hashtag green, you can go and ask questions, and we will ask them also to the panel in a few minutes time. So please do so. Then I'll just turn to you, Max, and talk a little bit about international shipping here. There's a risk, of course, that we're not going to get started because of the cost gaps that Bernard was just talking about. But who should start? Is it up to the ship owners to start buying the ships now, or is it the fuel producers that need to start producing the fuel and hope that there'll be an offtake? Or how do we get this whole transition started from your point of view?
Yes, thank you, Max. Yeah, I just want to mention one thing that I attended several seminars during the COP26, and that many seminars that people say that the technology is already there and the fuel is already there. But actually, to be honest, that the ammonia is prohibited to use as a fuel under the IMO regulation because of its toxic nature. And so that first we have to change it to use on a commercial ship. For that purpose, that we have to have the standard of the design of the of the tanks or the pipings or the security measures like sensing technology or so on, or that the leakage monitoring, or that evacuation protocol, or the for that, so the seafarers requirement for training and so on. That important parts are completely missing at this moment. But unless that issue is solved, that the no shipyard can build a ship, so that the normally if we order shipyards to build a ship for us, it takes 2 years from the signing the contract until the delivery, even for the normal ships. And so that to order the first ammonia fuel ships, it may take longer. So prior to that, we have to have regulation to allow the shipyards to allow the shipping companies to use ammonia as a marine fuel. So that is not taking into the consideration from the timeline that I see many. That is the one issue. But I'm not hesitating. We are not hesitating to go to that word, as we are a kind of the department store of the shipping, and we operate over 700 vessels worldwide. And to aim net zero world by 2050, meaning that by December of the 2049, we have to be placed or to have a major modification of the fuel tanks and engines for that number of ships, right? And so that even we order new one, or to have a major modification every year by 50 ships, meaning that every week new ships delivery or the modification, but it takes 15 to 20 years to replace all. So that it's a very long project. And so that to start quickly is important, but also to think how to work steady to reach the goal is also important. So that at the first stage, to discuss seriously about the safety and security of the seafarer's life is one of the issues that I want to raise.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And here we have a couple of questions from the audience.
Yes, and hello again also to the community outside online. Received some questions on Slido. And one question is actually in view of the need of enormous energy amounts to produce alternative fuels. How do you see the competition with other sectors, like for instance, aviation and land transport? Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I very much appreciate that question from your audience. I think there are some who think of the competition between the energy space and the transportation space as a zero-sum game, but indeed, I think what we've heard from our industry and our folks is that it is demand that creates the production at scale. And so this is what's going to drive the cost. So I welcome that competition between transportation and grid and industry on these fuels, because I think that's what's going to drive us to more adoption and at a faster pace.
Yes, I think Bernard, maybe you also have a view on that.
Yeah, I very much agree. We tend to believe in the market, and if we see that we have a market opportunity to decarbonize this main ammonia site in Netherlands, which I mentioned, we will demand 2 to 4 gigawatts of renewable energy, and we believe that the market will then respond and establish more capacity. Of course, and I didn't mention that, but I do believe that we need some transition in between now and the perfect future. So I believe that so-called blue ammonia, but ammonia based on fossil fuels, but with carbon capture and storage, is probably needed as a bridging solution before we get to a full-scale decarbonized system in the future. So we're also investigating that and looking at how we can start delivering blue ammonia as this bridging opportunity.
And maybe I can also ask you to just elaborate, because I know it's a bit of a sneaky question, but we have this 5% that we say that's the target of the zero emission shipping mission. We want to have 5% of total fuel consumption be alternative fuels by 2030. Is that realistic at all?
I couldn't make that calculation right here and now, but I tend to be on the optimistic side of what technology can deliver. We are already capturing quite a lot of CO2 in our ammonia plants, which is used commercially for beverages, storage of food, etc. That's CO2. We know how to capture CO2. We just need to have an incentive from the market to do that.
Sounds good. Great. Good. I would then. Are there any more questions that are coming up now? Or should we save them for later, or how does it work? Yeah, just one more.
Maybe one more question. What potential disruptive changes in the industry and supply chain will come from the implementation of green fuels?
I could go first. This is, for our industry, this is a major disruption, because if you look at the global ammonia market today, it's produced about 180 million tons of ammonia. And this is predominantly used for fertilizer to provide food to the global population. But if we consider the energy demand in the shipping industry alone, that by far outscales the existing ammonia capacity in our industry, meaning that the world will have to put in place either carbon capture and storage based and or green and renewable energy based ammonia capacity. So this is potentially a major disruption for our industry.
Yes, thanks. And I'm saving you a little bit, Max, because you're going to be participating also in the second round. So so you don't feel overlooked. So I think before I round off this first one, I need to ask you, Kelly, maybe if you could just talk about a few of those major initiatives on the US side that you see playing into the zero emission shipping mission. If you want to just make a little bit of advertisement on what of the things that you think will have the most impact for our mission brought to the table from the US government side, what would those be?
I appreciate it. And I also wanted to say I very much appreciate the input as to the challenges that industry has in order to accelerate this. And so those are the sorts of things. This is the sort of continuum that we need for government to be able to implement regulations and policy that will drive further research and will be able to be transferred to industry. So I just really appreciate that. Some of the things that we're doing within the Department of Energy is, well, our secretary announced the third carbon negative Earth shot, the third of three. These Earth shots really are very specific technical goals over one decade. You know, back in 1961, President Kennedy had the moon shot, where in 10 years, he was going to put Americans on the moon, and he did so in less time. If we fast forward to 2011, the Department of Energy announced its Sunshot, where we looked to reduce the cost of solar by 75% within a decade. And we did that by 2017. And now the Secretary has announced 3 Earth shots, which I think are very, very much relevant to this industry. One being the first one being the hydrogen shot, where we look to get $1 per kilogram of hydrogen to be produced within 1 decade, and that's clean hydrogen, not necessarily a colored hydrogen or one or the other, but really 1 ton of carbon per kilogram of hydrogen. And so these are the new Earth shots that we are looking to announce, and I think that's one of the biggest ones that we're very excited about. We also have a number of programs, each to its scale, that really moves us out of the labs and into the market. This is really, I mean, if you're going to just keep in the labs, it's not very useful for climate, is it? So these are sort of the things that we're trying to do to move us to scale, to be able to be adopted by folks like you in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. So I'll just round it off with this first part of the panel by asking you, Max. So if you are to say, what is the most important action that needs to happen now if we want to get started on the right foot and we want to have the scale up of alternative fuels to happen soon? What is the most important action in your mind?
Yes, that I have attended several seminars, but there was no participation from the shipbuilding industries. You know, that we have to ask shipbuilders. We're a shipping company. We're not building the ship by ourselves. We have to ask them. And they are, you know, it's a huge, you know, assembly in industry, right? and they're mostly based in Asia. You know that the shipbuilding is very dominant in Asia, as the China is the largest shipbuilding capacity, and the South Korea is the second, and the third is Japan. So by these three countries, that the more than 90% of the commercial vessels are built. Although of course that the engine technology for engine is provided by European companies, but you know that the building the ship is there. And the currently that the, you know, so we have to mobilize all the shipbuilding capacity in Asia to be able to build the you know, ammonia fuel ships or that or hydrogen fuel. It's otherwise it's a kind of chicken and egg issue that you want ships to supply, right? So that is I think the kind of the driving force. You have to involve that, you know, all the players needs to make it happen.
Get the whole chain moving, and also
Yeah.
the shipyards involved. Bernard?
Maybe just to mention that in the project Nordic Green Ammonia Powered Ships, we are now moving to the next phase, which is a complete design of ammonia powered vessel. So we are taking steps in the direction that you point.
Yeah. But the size of the ships is literally a bit smaller, right? That is to reduce the GHG emission really is that we have to make a lot of the big ships, you know, over the Panama side or so, big container ships or the tankers or and so on, that have to be replaced by the zero emission ships. So that is the issue that, you know.
And you, Kelly, if you were to point to one action that is needed in the very short run now to get us started on the right track to really scale up the alternative fuels, what would you point to?
I would point to conversations like these where we have as many people and as inclusive of a discussion as absolutely possible, because we don't know what the barriers are unless the people who are experiencing them are at the table. And I think that goes out to the communities as well, the communities that live in these port areas, to be able to think through what they need as well. So I think that's where we're going to make the biggest difference, is to get people to have ownership, because they've had a voice at the table as to what's the barrier and how do we remove it, whether it be technical, whether it be social, whether it be environmental or justice oriented.
So we need to make sure that everybody becomes the winners of this transition and nobody is left behind.
100%.
Thank you so much. And now thank you to Kelly and to Bernard. And I will ask you to have a seat and enjoy the rest of the show. And then at the same, I will ask Fridtjof Unander, Executive Director for Oceans, Energy and Sustainability at the Research Council of Norway, and also ask Marco Alvera, CEO of SNAM and Chairman of the Green Hydrogen Catapult, to come and join me here at the stage. So again, a great representation of the production side of the green fuels, of the user side with shipping, and also the authorities with the Norwegian government here. And I'm going to start here with you, Fridtjof, and ask you about the policy and research side. What do you think is needed to really get this acceleration going to get us scaled up? From your perspective, from Norway's side, what are the major initiatives that you see that need to happen?
Thank you. First, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let me first start by thanking Denmark and the US for joining us in co-leading this mission. And let me just dwell 1 second on international collaboration, because the challenges we discuss here really require that we work together to find solutions and that we share the best knowledge. And because the industry is clearly international, both from the shipping side, but also the technology side. And of course, there's expertise all over the world, and I think we need to really find efficient means of pooling this together. And I have to say, it's very, very inspiring to see the US being back, if I may say so, at such a strength as we experience here at COP, and also what you mentioned, Kelly, was very inspiring, and I think that's one key issue. Actually, I think moving this forward is that we can have international collaboration with the significant strength, and we certainly hope that this mission can contribute in that. But going back to your question in terms of as a research council, in Norway we have both a funding agency for research, as well as we provide policy advice to the government on research priorities, which in both cases put us in a let's say we have a responsibility for picking the right project, financing the right project, at the same time as we also have a responsibility in giving the right advice to the government when they decide how to fund research. I should say that we work quite integrated when it comes to the maritime industry and the energy industry, and we believe that's a strength that we can hopefully also bring to the table in the international collaboration. Bernhard alluded to that from the Norwegian side, we have a strong energy sector, both in terms of renewables, but also in the opportunity to produce what we call blue hydrogen. But at the end of the day, it's the same hydrogen, but utilizing CCS. And that's a very important aspect of this also from the Norwegian side, to integrate the value chains and look at that. And I should also mention that we have quite a lot of funding towards the maritime industry in itself. So we also address vessels and ships and so on. And I should mention that we have been working quite actively in promoting coastal shipping, zero emission coastal shipping, which is of course not as demanding as deep sea, but still we have gotten some experiences there that we hope we can contribute when we work on scaling up. But we need to work fast, as you said. Yes, thank you.
So a lot of pieces to the puzzle are being brought to the table from Norway, and that fits really well into the big picture. So thanks a lot for those comments. If I turn to you, Marco, as chairman of the Green Hydrogen Catapult, what are the main things that the catapult is you could say bringing to the table, and where you're the driving force in getting the production and use of the zero emission fuels getting scaled up?
Yes, thank you. So we identified shipping very early on as one of the key verticals to focus on. And that's because getting to net zero not only allows us to reduce the 3% and growing amount of emissions, but because it's really a way to scale up quickly the demand for electrolyzers. And so we founded the Catapult. The idea was 2 years old, to really say, interviewing all the electrolyzer manufacturers, how much capacity globally do we need to get to oil parity in the next 5 years? This is what, Kelly, we called our moonshot, which was a 5-year journey that we were going to present at the last year COP. So we got an extra year now. So we started off as a mission to get by 2025, now 2026, to $2 per kilo, which is 50 euros a megawatt hour. Small parenthesis, a big issue, and I say this in every panel I go, in the energy industry, is we measure oil in barrels or liters or tons, gas in million BTU or pence per therm or million cubic feet, electricity in kilowatt. We should move to a single measure and turn everything into kilowatt hours. That's the only way we can start understanding each other. I've been in the industry 20 years. I still need to carry around a conversion. So anyway, going back to hydrogen, $50 a megawatt hour, $2 a kilo, in 5 years, parity with oil. And we figured by interviewing all the producers of these electrolyzers that we needed 25 gigawatts of global demand. Now, the good news is that 5% of shipping would generate 100 gigawatt of global demand. So that's 4 times what we need to get to oil parity in 5 years. And that's why we now have the Earthshot, which is to get to coal parity within the decade. This means producing hydrogen at half of the price of oil today, because coal parity is $1 a kilo or $25 a megawatt hour. So now we're in a surge of commodity prices. But if we go to a pre-COVID energy level, you figure that people are buying low sulfur, high sulfur fuel oil for around $60, $70 a megawatt hour. So we can be there in 5 years and be there half of that within the decade. So the Catapult, Yara is part of that, together with Iberdrola, with Envision from China, with Aqua. we are really trying to put the supply side in shape. We have some recent additions, but what's really important are forums like this, where we can put together demand and supply. And I think we can take it a step further and really begin to work with the C40, which we're already doing, the ports, the other alliances, the corridor alliances, to say how much volume do we need in which harbor by when. So on top of everything that Bernard and Kelly already said, and you already said on the need for the ship builders to get organized, what we also really need is the energy supply chain to get organized. And the only way this can happen within the decade is if we start scaling that up by identifying the key lanes, the key ports, the key volumes, the time. Price is no longer an issue. Of course, we will have the option of having blue hydrogen as well as green, and we can go on. But really, I think the key message is that the Catapult's mission has already essentially been accomplished, and the shipping announcement on the 5% quadruples the global demand just for shipping. And then we will add the green fertilizers, the green steel, the green cities, the green trucks. And so it's really, really going to happen a lot quicker. The problem is not price. The problem is not availability of land or sun. The problem is getting enough infrastructure built in time, finding enough engineers, enough project managers, enough companies with the guts to take a little bit of a bet and start investing before the market is there.
That sounds like a very optimistic, you could say constructive look at it, that we have many of the building blocks to take us there. And now it's about rolling up the sleeves and getting us going. And here, of course, it was also interesting to see the Clydebank declaration just a little bit earlier today, where the UK government has gathered together 19 countries to commit to participate, start and get rolling also. Max, we met also there at the Clydebank declaration, and how do you see it from the perspective of NYK Line participating in green corridors? Is that something that you say we are ready for that? Is that something that you will leave for others?
Yes. That the green corridor concept that we endorse, we participated to that declaration, and as we need ammonia fuel ships to achieve their emission. And that for us, that for the Japanese shipping company, that of course we are trading ships worldwide, but quite many ships are going to or back from Japan. And one of the large commodity is iron ore. Iron ore is mostly imported from Australia or from Brazil to Japan. And that our company doesn't have probably the capability to produce the green ammonia, to be honest. So we have to import around. And it is expected that Australia will be the major sources as energy source in Japan. So why don't we use ammonia as a marine fuel if we are importing ammonia from Australia to Japan, so that we can fuel the ship there together with the loading the cargo. One of the projects that we are now working with is that the ammonia carrier, carrying the ammonia as a cargo, they're using the ammonia as a marine fuel. Right? It's quite natural. Then, as a second step, if we see that the largest commodity carrying from Australia, it's iron ore. So it's a very natural step. So that that we have to gradually start the project from the major thing or start from minor. I don't know which is better, but it is very sure for us this time that we have energy there, we have fuel there. So that is a very straight understanding, so a straight way of the thinking, I think.
It sounds like you're already doing your preparation, that you have the technology and the interest, and also some of the right vessel segments for joining into this discussion on the green corridors. Fridtjof, the Norwegian government was also a signatory to the green corridors declaration that came with the Clydebank. how does Norway play into to the green corridors discussion? How do you see you as a nation being contributing? What are the relevant areas for you to participate in?
I think, let me just say that when I mentioned this coastal shipping, I would say about a success that we've had in Norway. It's been partly because we've had this public procurement, which is sort of in some same way, but much smaller, sort of guaranteed market for zero emission ships. So we certainly have some experiences with that. I should also mention that we have linked that to taking a quite, let's say, aggressive, mission-oriented approach using different instruments that we have in Norway. So in basically supporting projects all the way from lab to market, as also Kelly alluded to, so that one project can get support step by step towards the market and then ending up in a guaranteed market, if you like. So that approach could be something we could also move into the green corridor thinking and how we can best work together to sort of integrate along the innovation chain and then solving challenges and then meeting sort of the guaranteed market that this corridor will give. I just want to say that because there's also always a sort of a discussion about whether technologies are ready or whether we need more research, but I think it's very important that to say that we need both. It's not one or the other, because very often we're in this discussion that it's ready just to scale up and implement, because it isn't. There's always sort of we always need research and innovation to push solutions forward. So that's so from the Norwegian side, I think this is this integrated approach along the innovation chain towards those market mechanisms. But I will also add that sort of this total energy system perspective, because the maritime industry is really now much more tightly linked to will be much more tightly linked to the energy system development. But many speakers have alluded to that, but that's very important to address so that we don't make mistakes and end up in this chicken and egg situation that we discussed.
And Marco, is the same for you that the green corridors and the demonstration projects, is that an avenue that's going to help you could say, in your moonshot on getting the scale up in really moving?
Yeah, I think the moonshot is achieved essentially. We need to get to the earth shot, which is where it gets really interesting, because the only way China and India will really start getting off coal is when they have a cheaper domestically produced alternative. And shipping, as I mentioned, plays a key role. One ship alone would generate almost 0.5 giga of electrolyzer demand, and we need to create infrastructure in the ports that would be underutilized at the beginning. So we can think of capacity payments and other mechanisms, but really getting the consumers on board, I think, is a key point. As Bernard was saying, the cost today of an ammonia container is only like 50 euros more per container. And so if you turn that into the price of a pair of jeans, it's like a few cents. If you turn it into the price of an iPhone, it's like 0.0002%. So why not? And I think a lot of work is happening with the consumer companies. Ideally, Amazon or Walmart or both have labels. So it's a net zero shipped product. And then we have net zero consumers eventually. Net zero consumer should have a badge of honor on his Facebook or Instagram account where he can offset automatically all his non-CO2 native purchases. And there's a lot of people out there who would probably pay, so long as it's 1%, it's not gonna really make a difference. So getting consumers on board is really important. The lanes are really important as a place to get going. But we cannot stress enough, and it's already been said a few times by Max and Bernard, the standards need to be set. We need to decide what blue hydrogen is, because you can have very nasty blue if it's coming with a lot of methane emissions and not a lot of CO2 captured. Or you can have very prestigious and very clean blue if it's done in Norway with very high methane emission standards and very strong CO2. So first step is define what clean hydrogen is. That will allow us to define what clean ammonia is, and then we have to make sure it's commercially insertable in a ship's tanks for that to work. But there's a lot of optionality with the technology, because you can use it in a combustion engine, you can use it in a fuel cell, you can use straight hydrogen as well. There's a lot of things that you can do that I think we still haven't yet explored. But I think it's not a question of will it happen, it's a question of the challenge is making it happen within 10 years. And making it happen within 10 years requires a paradigm change. You know, it can take 20 years to make a new airplane or 7 years to make a new ship. But during the war, we were churning out airplanes. What we did with the vaccines, defining standards with a real sense of urgency. That's the only chance we have of making a lot of this happen really within the next 5 years, the first lanes, so that then by the end of the decade, it's becoming mainstream. So we really need a call to action. We need events like these. We need the Mission Possible and the catapults and the first movers, and all these coalitions are incredibly helpful. And so we can't just wait for policies to happen. We need to sit down, open up our procurement strategies, figure out how much steel we need, how much ammonia we need, where we need it, by when we need it. And then, you know, prices is the easier part of the equation.
Sounds good. Maybe it's time for a question from the participant, and maybe I should also say here that if there's anybody in the audience that have questions, then after this one, I encourage you to ask your questions also, so you participate also.
Yes, one more question from the audience, and we have a lot of focus on ammonia. And the question is actually very much if we have a plan B, if we do not solve the security and safety questions around ammonia.
It's not really a big challenge. We've been handling ammonia safely for more than a century, so we know how to do this, and that's why ammonia is already a promising starting point, because there is an existing infrastructure for global ammonia trade in place, and it can be leveraged as the starting point also for shipping.
So it's more a task than a problem, or something that needs to be solved, I suppose. Other views on this?
I would only add that we don't need a plan B, because we have a plan B, C, and D, because hydrogen will have a lot of derivatives, and maybe on smaller consumer vessels, there will be direct hydrogen. I mean, here we're talking about the big container vessels, but on smaller consumer ships doing shorter distances in Norway, they're doing a lot with batteries as well. You can have a hydrogen supplying a battery. You can have, depending on the distances. So there's a variety of solutions. It can be fuel cell, it can be combustion engine, but the bottom line is that ammonia seems, and there's a consensus now that wasn't there last year. So one of the real benefits of these conversations and these coalitions is that you suddenly get the big players in the industry to reach a consensus. So I think there's now a consensus that it's going to be a green ammonia. We just need to make it certifiable as quickly as possible.
I think that from the energy density point of view, that there is no alternative other than the ammonia for the large ships for long distance. And as he said that this is not the issue of the challenges. It's just to sort out the proper steps, protocols to handle the fuel safely. As we carry a lot of the hazardous material. Even LNG fuel is a low flash point, so we are handling it carefully. So that kind of thing that we have to set up and have to have a standard and give them the right training for the ship's crew. That's it.
Sounds good. Yes, please.
Hiya. So it's very clear that there's a cost gap to be addressed in the medium short term. Part of that is policy, but part of that is willingness of customers to potentially pay more. So my question is, what are you seeing or hearing from the customer side of shipping? Who's willing to pay? Or, how would you describe that?
Maybe that's for you, Max. Are the customers ready to pay a premium for green transportation?
Yeah, there is two issues. One is that the cost of the ships that ship owner has to pay, that's to build the ship, and the fuel is the finally that the cost difference is to be transferred to the customers, so that currently that we have 60,000 or 70,000 ships are working for international trade. Then that the normal life of the commercial vessel is 25 years to 30 years. So it is already 2021. But we have a vessel that to receive from the shipyard tomorrow. And normally we use the vessel for 15 years and sell to the second-hand market. And it is used by other owner for another 10 years or so. But as we are shifting to zero emission world, then when at the normal cycle that when we decide to sell a ship currently burning the fossil fuel in middle of 2030s or the late 30s, is there the second-hand market there? And also the thing that the second-hand users, are they able to buy the second-hand ships burning the fossil fuel? So that lots of the demand for the new building of the ships is double. And also at the same time, so many ships has to go to demolition. So that kind of the whole chain has to work synchronized. And so that it's a big challenge for the shipping industry. So that the standardization or the mobilize all the capacity, and for that purpose that that the know-how or that we have to that all the technology have to be open and shared among the industry, and now for the shipbuilding and the ship operation and so on, working together as a whole industry.
Marco, do you pick up anything from the customer side? Do you have a feeling for what the willingness to pay is?
No, as I said, I perhaps see the cost curve in so much granularity that I think by the time the infrastructure is there, it will not be as big of an issue. And that $60 per container, whatever you put in the container, it's negligible. So, and we're not talking about all containers, we're talking about the first movers. And so really by the time we get to scale, because we're talking about 5% by 2030, by the time we get to scale, we just need the ball to get rolling now, so that in order to get to the net zero by 2040, which is the other big commitment of the first movers on the full net zero, we have those extra 10 years when the cost point is already low to build out the remaining infrastructure. So it's kind of a 3-point strategy. Next 5 years, build the first lanes, build the pilots, get it certified, make sure it works so everyone can raise up to the challenge. Next 5 years, still within the decade, build the first volumes to get to the 5%. That's huge, but it's only 5%. So you don't need 95% of the customers are still running on to get to net zero for the first movers. And then you have another decade to 2050 to get the second movers to net zero. So,
Your plan,
yeah,
that we're having here. I'm not going to cheat you, and Marco also for giving your view on what is the one action that needs to happen now, so we get started. If we are to prioritize on just one thing just now, what is it that we should do? Certification. Yeah.
I would again stress the importance of getting the energy system perspective in when we work on the fuel side, including the infrastructure. Really get an integrated approach on that. I think that's one key issue.
Sounds good. Good. I will say thank you very much to our panelists, and just imagine here, where else than on the COP26 can we bring together Asia, the Americas, Europe, and other parts of the world. We have the fuel side, fuel production side, we have the shipping side together, we have the private sector, we have the public sector, we have everybody that needs to be around the table to get this going here together today. So that's of course a very major milestone in itself. So that's great. I've sensed a lot of urgency. We talked a lot about the 2050 goals, and it seems now that most of people are taking that for granted. Of course, 0 by 50, that's a given. So now let's focus on something else, which is how do we get started much sooner than that and get some real traction before 2030, which is also fantastic to hear. This urgency and this lack of patience. I wish that the demonstrators outside could hear that from you as well. So So thank you very much. I'd like to also thank to the Bellona Foundation and the Norwegian government for hosting this, providing the frames and the technology, and all the listeners on the web and your attendance here today. So thank you so much for coming, and I wish you a fantastic rest of COP26.
Ask the speaker.